Hi Adam, this is a quick little YouTube for you just to help guide you with what we'll need for your delivery module. So you'll see within your group's document, right at the end there's assessment record Adam Barry and there's assessment record RPL, and that RPL is part of what you'll all be doing as an activity, but this is one specifically to record your evidence for your, or partially for your delivery module. So if you double click on that, you'll see that this is the assessment report, and this is something to focus on after you've completed all of the other activities and questions and all of the other YouTubes, okay? So, maybe in a week or 2 weeks, when you're ready to do your deliveries, your 40-minute delivery sessions, this is the document that we capture all of that evidence on. So you'll see this really is just about one of those 4 units within the delivery module. This is make a presentation, but it's the checklist, the observation checklist that covers all of the module, and this is why I'm sort of sharing this with you now. So you'll see your name's on there, and there's a spot there for an assessor, and what I would like you to organise is just one person or several people within your group that are actually doing this program. Once they've completed the first module, so they've gone through over the next week or 2 and done all of those activities and questions, if they can actually function as assessors for you, okay? So they would click into their own version of the Adam Barry document and they'd put their name in. So just moving on down, you can see that the purpose for you is to establish if competence is achieved following all of that learning that you've just done. So, and really the learning, I guess, is largely attempted here in this this YouTube lecture directly to you. So, we've got that your employer, the principal Richard Barry is notified, you've been notified that this will be coming up now, and I'm the supervising assessor, even though you'll have someone directly observing you, and if it's filmed, that gives me a chance to run through the checklist as well. So, we're going to look at a real work activity. So that's where Richard has identified some training that you can actually deliver to the staff. So it is actually a real workplace activity, a very strong piece of evidence. And there's some, for this particular unit, there's some interview questions that when you're partnered up with someone in your group, someone else from the 10 of you, you'll be just swapping your questions that you've created. You'll get to that when you get to the bottom and the end. I'll just show you where that was. That's this one here. So once you get to the end, you've played the YouTube instruction, you understand what to do with that. And that's where you'll ask each other your own questions that you've made up. So there's instructions about that in the other one for everyone. So this is what I need to draw your attention to. So what I'd like you to start gathering, please, is just a photocopy of your certificate for an OH&S and any other qualifications that you've got. A photocopy of your driver's license or passport, any one of those types of photo IDs. Your birth certificate, and have all of these cited and signed and dated by Richard, please. Now, you might then just scan them all electronically and save it as a PDF, and if you could just insert that PDF version of all of them collected at once just here. So the way to do that again is you just insert, object, create from file, and then you browse. Maybe you've stuck that on your desktop there, and then you just scroll down and find wherever you've put it. Sorry, I've got heaps on my desktop here. Say that, pretend that's it. Hit insert and make sure you click display as icon, and it'll just come up as a little icon. I can then double click on that and be able to save to your training record all of those signed off verified documents by Richard. Okay, we'll also need the PowerPoint slides just in a PDF form. If you could just have that inserted there as well using that same system, that would be a fantastic product of evidence that we've got there, a very strong piece of evidence. Now, as well as that, we need some supplementary evidence because we can't rely on that teacher's registration. So this is where we're looking at a concept you're going to learn about pretty quickly with sufficiency. Under the rules of evidence, we need to make sure that there's sufficient evidence. So we don't have that strong piece of teacher registration, so there's all of this supplementary evidence here. So if you double click on here, this is a training attendance form, and this is the Evoke one. So if you've got training attendance forms specific for your school, please use those if you would prefer to, and then just insert them onto this document once everyone's signed them. Otherwise, just use our Evoke ones, that's fine. So you just list the people that are attending your sessions and have them sign it. My suggestion would be if you printed 2 of these sheets and had half of them sign one and half of them sign the other, and just, you know, maybe change the date or change it to a different delivery time on the same date, that can actually indicate then that you have taught to 2 different groups. So that would be a little suggestion. So yeah, and then you could just put ditto marks there for the company. You know, it's obviously your school there, and then you would sign that and you would enter in the date of training. So I don't know why that isn't coming. Oh, I think that's actually coming up with the automatic date that it's printed on, which is today's date. Once you've done that, just electronically scan those and save them back in, and you can use that template for all of your sessions. So we do need 3 sessions in total with a minimum of 40 minutes, and that means that if you can split this into, you know, 2 different groups, you know, half of one group and then half on another training attendance form, that would be great. And then you can deliver, you know, a second session in succession. And then if you've got just the lesson plan for the first session, as if you were not doing it face-to-face but as an e-learning group. And please ring me if that's confusing. So I'll just close out of there. You'll see here this is the lesson plan template. Actually, this might help visually to explain what I mean. So I've got lesson plan session 1, lesson plan session 1B. So the first session you're delivering, obviously it's face-to-face, you're just changing the assessment, the lesson plan to different resources or ways that you would plan for that session if you were conducting e-learning. So just one sec, I'll open that up and show you what I mean. All right, so you've got the date you put in, you put the session name. So I'm not sure what Richard wants you to be training them in, but just find a title for that course and put the duration at least as 40 minutes there, and put the objective. So by the end of the session, what do you want learners to be able to know, or what tasks do you want them to perform? Then this is the resources section, which would be different from face-to-face to e-learning. So depending on your context, somebody learning by distance or somebody learning face-to-face. So obviously, if it was e-learning, you'd tick the e-learning button there, and you can do that just however you like. Maybe put an X in there, that's probably easier. Or the first session would be in the classroom. Now, if it's the classroom, you might be using a whiteboard, or if it's in the staff room, you might be just using your laptop and a data projector, perhaps, speakers, you know, are you giving out worksheets, are you giving out pens, what sort of resources are you using? If it's e-learning, you would probably just have the e-learning. Let me just get rid of that. And probably just your laptop would be the only two for that one. So that's how you'd fill out lesson plan 1B in a different context. So, you know, you have your different phases of your 40-minute session, whether it's a 70-minute school session, any session for whatever duration, you break it down into phases. So you always introduce the session and you want to introduce the objectives. And that's actually, you know, just there as a little memory jogger here. And then you're going to demonstrate it or model what it is that you want them to do. So by the end of this session, I need to see you, you know, follow this procedure or create this product or understand this concept or know how to follow these procedures, whatever it's going to be, okay? So that's the I do phase. And then you get them to practice it in groups or practice it directly with you. So that's the we do together. Then you break it off and allow them to do it independently on their own, and then you review. And now none of these are equal in time. So you might find that this first part might be, just say you're starting at 12 o'clock for simplicity's sake. So that's going to start at 12, okay? Your I do session, so your objectives and your ice breaking, you know, hi, I'm Adam, and you know, the objectives of today are blah, blah, blah. By the time you've talked about your objectives, that might take, you know, the first, say, 5 minutes. And then you just move down to the I do. So that's where you're demonstrating it, or you're showing them, you know, the final product of what they'll be creating, or you actually demonstrate how you get to the final product. So that demonstration might have taken 10 minutes. Now this we do section will take a lot longer perhaps. So then you might actually find that you're starting this one. So the demonstration might take 10 minutes. That would bring that down to 12:15. We do, that might actually take a good chunk of time and allow for a bit of extra time. As adult learners, they're going to want to contribute, they're going to want to feel like an equal. So you have to allow that level of respect and dignity to allow them to contribute. But, you know, you're in charge of the session, and, you know, you might just have to bring it back around to what you need them to be doing. So you want to see if they can demonstrate that. So look, I'm not sure what you'll be training them on. It might just be knowledge, you know, you might be giving them a new procedure or a policy that they have to follow. So if it was a task, you'd need more time for them to do it. If it was questions, you know how long it's going to take for them to answer a couple of your questions. So that's how you're working out the time factor there. And that on your lesson plan, if that's down in front of you when you're presenting, you'll see that that just jogs to see if you're on time. So you're really wanting to get that, you know, we do together portion of it happening by 12:15, 15 minutes into the session. When you're getting them to wrap up and just demonstrate even a portion of it, so you know that you're checking for their understanding and that they can independently do it, that might be, you know, by about 12:35. And then there's a quick review. So, you know, the review might then happen, say at about, you know, in the last 5 minutes. So it starts 5 minutes before the session ends. And always, always, if you've promised someone that the session's going to run for X amount of time, make sure by this stage you're checking your times and you always finish on time, even if you have to give them homework or, you know, put it forward into a new session. Don't ever ask permission from a group if you could extend it by 10 or 15 minutes. You always have to finish in a timely manner with adults. So session objectives, you know, you're ticking off that you've covered those. Now, OH&S, so, you know, you're looking around the room, You know, you might find a trip hazard, or you've done OH&S, so you'll know to find some little risk that you can control and make them aware of. That'd be great. Or it might just simply be, you know, listen, I've done a risk assessment on the room, but if you're identifying any hazard, make sure that you come and let me know straight away. You know, that's your responsibility as an employee to identify hazards. It might be something to that effect. And I don't really know the function of the lesson plan, and I've created this a long time ago. I guess the fact that you've just got it there in front of you ready to check the times there. So, you know, this is what you will be doing. Is it chalk and talk? Is it a PowerPoint? You know, what are you doing to show them the final product? And then what are they doing? Now, your school might have its own lesson plans and you've got lots of teachers there to help you. That's fine. I don't mind if you use your lesson plan rather than ours. Just make sure that you can show me these 4 phases, the resources, and especially the learning styles that you're going to be using. Okay, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. We also need to make sure, whatever lesson plan you're using, that you do a self-reflection at the end. So, you know, you might have had a set time here where you were going to allow half an hour for the whole group to do an activity, but you ran over time in this, and so you had to modify it, and instead of allowing them all to practice the whole thing, they only got to practice a portion. However, you've had to modify your time or your activities. And, you know, you can talk here about, you know, the strengths of the session. You felt that you did something particularly well, and then some areas that you'll improve upon. And as teachers or vet trainers, we are always self-reflecting, and there's always 100 ways you could do it better, and that's part of a continual improvement process. So, you know, be quite open and honest. No one's judging you or saying that you're not yet competent because you're putting your hand up and talking about how you might make it even better next time. In fact, I would look at that more positively, you know, the fact that you can self-reflect and commit to continual improvement. Now, let's just jump up a bit and look at this learner style strategies. So with learners, we can categorize them very basically into a few different learning styles. So quite usually people are visual learners, so you can use different resources there, like PowerPoints are always quite effective. Use your whiteboard or get them up. If you actually got them up to use the whiteboard, that would be a kinesthetic activity. Kinesthetic's all about your body movement, using your body to learn. That heads and shoulders check for understanding that I mentioned in an earlier YouTube, when you get through those, you get everyone to stand up. You may want to do this, you don't have to do this, but just to explain kinesthetic, they all stand up, they close their eyes. You say you put your hands on your heads for true, shoulders for false, and then you start making statements. You know, you might do this in the last 2 minutes to review, and then you get a visual idea of all of the learners, so it doesn't matter whether there's 50 in a group or 10 or 5. At a glance, in 2 minutes, you can see exactly who has got the knowledge about what you've taught. So kinesthetically, they're using their body to remember and recall. So that's just a revision of learning in itself. So there's a couple of different kinesthetic things that you might want to throw in there. So obviously you would be using a PowerPoint or some type of visual, so you can just highlight that. And we go into home and just use that highlight button there. If it was PowerPoint, just highlight PowerPoint. Whatever it is that you're using, you know, you might want to add your own there. Now, you will be speaking to them, so there'd be some element of lecture in there. And whatever else you're using. If you're using any kinesthetics, throw those in. If you're doing any group work, even the fact if you get a bit of a class discussion going. And you want to control that though, because that can really leap away and eat at your time. So you'd put a time limit on that. Just say Okay, it's 12:07. For the next 3 minutes till the clock here, and you point to the wall visually and say when the clock gets to 12:10, we'll shut it down. But let's just talk for 3 minutes now about whatever the issue is, and you throw it over to them, and you can just control it a bit by saying, okay, we've got 2 minutes left, that's great, who else wants to add to that? And that way you're actually guiding it and controlling the parameters. Now, theoretical, that's your more scientific-based style of learner. They like to sort information, they like to collect data or go quite deeply. So you'd be giving them, you know, like the auditory learner, they'd be getting lots of reading material, but they would be sorting through that and summarising that. Yeah, so there's a smorgasbord of ideas, and that's going to cover off some of your learning style strategies there. Now, I'm sure your teacher friends there would be able to elaborate a lot more on those learning styles. I think that basically covers it. You would also provide feedback, well, not to your registered training organisation, but to your school. So you would report, you would write this and give it to Richard if there was any resources that weren't working effectively, like the data projector, or you know, you're giving him a heads up that they need more whiteboard markers or whatever's going on. So only if that's necessary, you could fill in the recommendations to improve whatever resources. Maybe Richard's given you a whole heap of paperwork, and you could be suggesting, oh look, you know, a few PowerPoint slides would have been helpful there, or making sure that they can provide you with training on how to create some PowerPoints, if you like. So there we go, that's the lesson plans and how you would fill those out. So I'll get out of there. So there's one for that, your main session. I'm just going to give you a template there that's your e-learning session, so you don't deliver that one, you only just fill out that lesson plan for it. And then your lesson plan session 2. Now what session 2 is, it's the session that follows this first 40-minute session, so you have to give a succession, you know, one session that follows with the same style of objective as the first one. So it's almost like part 1 and part 2, okay? So part 1 will be 40 minutes, part 2 will be your session 2 for 40 minutes there. Okay, so they're able to be clicked into, you fill them out, you save it, and then you exit out of the document, and all of the work that you've put in there will remain embedded, and when you submit it back to me, I can double click, open it up and have a look. Now we're on to the observation checklist. So just to give you a heads up on this. So what I'd like you to arrange is for as many people in this group of 10, they all might want to have a go at this, and I've highly recommended that they do. They have a go at an observation checklist. So they open up their Adam Barry document, which is this one, and they can then tick you off as, you know, whether you can demonstrate satisfactorily this particular skill, or whether you don't, or whether it's just not applicable. And an example of a not applicable one, which has just been pre-ticked, is managing inappropriate behaviour. Now, I'm sure at your school with your staff there that there would be no inappropriate behaviour, but inappropriate behaviour might be someone who's a bit belligerent or arrogant and just wanting to override your session, and, you know, believes that they know better than you, and just wants to take over and use their time to talk about themselves or their attitude towards the concept, especially if they're disagreeing with it. So, you know, this is, in that type of case, you would have to say, right, thank you, I'm happy to discuss this further with you during the break, but you know, we've got about 15 minutes to get through this material, so happy to continue this conversation with you at the break, and you just sort of cut them down. it would be more in a workplace situation. I've certainly worked as an HR manager, and I've delivered workplace training right around the time of a enterprise bargaining agreement. And, you know, I've been there where people are wanting to, instead of deal with the training that we were there to deal with, they want to start heckling over the conditions of the EBA. And I just had to stand there and say, this isn't the forum for that discussion. These are our objectives, and I would point back to the whiteboard where I have the objectives visually available. And, you know, the forum for this session is these objectives here. And you can shut them down, you know, pretty much that way. That probably won't happen in your sessions, I would hope, for you. So we can just leave that as not applicable. You know, they didn't get to observe any bad behaviour. Now, so I've left them as yes, but obviously if they want to cut and paste and shift it to no for any of these that aren't quite satisfactory yet, they can just they would tick not satisfactory, and then they would give you some feedback. So not yet satisfactory in whatever element, and suggestions for next time. I mean, it's quite likely that there'll be no issues for you with this. So let's just go through so you're a little bit mentally prepared for your presentation. So, you know, obviously they've observed that you've been able to access some training resources, or you've come to the session with some resources, whether it's your handouts or whiteboard marker to write all over the whiteboard, PowerPoint presentation, whatever it is that you're intending to use. I'll just get rid of that one because it won't necessarily be relevant. Okay. So with whatever information Richard's given you, that you have either created an additional PowerPoint slide yourself, or a handout, or, you know, a quiz questionnaire, just something of your own that you've contributed to that process, that you've identified a hazard in the classroom. And if there wasn't any hazard, invite participants to of any hazards. You let them know it's their responsibility. All right. So, you know, you've done your Cert 4, so in OH&S, I'm sure that'll be fine. It seems a bit repetitive, again, that you've prepared resources for your delivery. So, you know, as I said, if Richard had given you a set of PowerPoints, you might have added 1 or 2 slides yourself. So that's a bit repetitive there, I apologise. Established a learning relationship with the participants. So, you know, you're establishing your if you've only got 40 minutes, you can't spend 15 minutes talking about yourself and your background and cracking jokes and icebreakers. But, you know, it would still be effective to just say, you know, hi, I'm Adam Barry, and in this session today, we're going to look at XYZ objectives, right? And that would be enough as establishing a relationship in a short session like 40 minutes. Unless you've got any awesome jokes that you want to share, and I'll look forward to watching them on the recording. Obviously, the jokes would have to be appropriate and professional. Okay, so ensured effective presentation. So that's all about your communication skills. So did you check for understanding? Have you invited them to give you any feedback? So what that terminology means is at least once in the 40-minute session, you are looking at their non-verbal body language. So you're looking for people's facial expressions, you know, with the face contorted a bit, where they look confused. you know, you might be looking at them fidgeting or wriggling or speaking quietly to each other. They mightn't be sure what you're talking about and be asking for clarification from someone sitting beside them. So in moments like that, or just randomly, you just might want to then say, you know, something to the effect of, am I making myself clear with that point? Have I explained that simply and clearly for you? Would you like me to just repeat that again? Okay, and that's a much better way of checking for understanding than saying, does anybody here not understand that? Because no one's going to be inclined to want to own up to that and feel like they might be perceived as a bit dumb. So, you know, make the onus on yourself. Would you like me to repeat that step one more time? Would you like me to just explain that in a different way? And then you might get the odd hand come up. And pause for a few seconds to allow people to respond to that and have that opportunity. You know, you can also invite them to provide feedback for you. Now, they're going to be given a... let me just get back to your... must be in a different section. There's also another little icon on there for you under your assessment record for a learner self-reflection. So you at the very least will get ticked on that point. If you mention to them, now at the end of this presentation you'll see on the desk in front of you there's a learner self-reflection. So at the end of our session here today, if you could just take 2 minutes to fill out this form, that would be fantastic, and you know then you've met that requirement. So differentiation, that's a term we chuck around in education. So we're looking at supporting diverse learners. So you know there'll be different age characteristics. I wouldn't expect in your sessions there would be any language literacy and numeracy issues if you're presenting to teachers. So, you know, it might be an age generational thing, which might affect their IT capabilities, for example. Just if there's any differentiation, any diversity in the group, that you've managed that. So at the very least, if there isn't, and there probably wouldn't be with a group of teachers, at least just making sure that everyone has a chance to participate and become involved. So if someone's being a bit quieter, you might call on them and say, you know, Richard, what do you think about that point? Or Richard, would you like to come up here for a moment and help me demonstrate? Now, Richard might be shy and not feel comfortable doing that, and that's fine, but what you've done is you've given them an opportunity, and that's all we're looking for. So we're looking at fairness and sharing the participation there. So monitor, this is your formative assessment. Once again, checking for understanding. Would you like me to repeat this again? These learner cues I've just been talking about. Another great idea, if you can get this on film, is a way to just make sure that their understanding is using your proximity. So don't just stand in the centre of the room at the front. If you can use your space a bit and walk among them, you know, especially if you're getting them to perform a task, you know, you're actually getting a chance to walk up and observe what they're doing and offer some positive feedback about that. Even if it's just the first few people that you can reach in front of you, that would be a great chance to, you know, be looking over. That might be a good thing to do when they're filling out their self-reflection, when you're actually walking up and checking that everyone's participating. So that you have a range of aids, so maybe not just a PowerPoint. The fact that you're speaking and you're using a PowerPoint, that's a range. You know, maybe you're adding a few extra points on a whiteboard if there's one in your room. Obviously things like your volume of voice, that you can project it so the people up the back of the room can hear, that you're not rushing, you're not speaking too quickly. You have some visual reinforcement, so that would be your PowerPoints, and any demonstration if it's that type of session. And obviously, again, it's here in your lesson plan that I do, we do, you do, review. We want those 4 phases coming out in the vet sector. So, you know, you can demonstrate, or you're holding up a model of what the document is, you know. So if your session, say, is on the procedures to fill out the new OH&S forms or risk management forms, you do it quickly. Then you get them in groups or pairs, and we do. So you're getting them to do it together. So by the time that they're trying it, they've got a little bit of support there. Then, you know, they have an opportunity to work on an element of it themselves, and you're then reviewing, okay, so the objectives today were X, Y, Z, we've done this, by filling out this form you've reached this objective, and, you know, and that's how you've summarised it off before you invite them to do their learner self-reflection. There we are, that summary again. Excuse me. The inappropriate behaviour, if it's applicable. You know, that you're behaving ethically, so you're not swearing, you're dressed appropriately, appropriate language, appropriate body language, so you're not flicking the bird at anybody. That you're respectful towards all of the participants there, and yeah, I guess, you know, you're upholding the legislative requirements if you've done, you know, the OH&S hazard check or invited them to report hazards. That's just an example there. You've finished in a timely manner. That's really important in the vet sector. And I guess in the school sector too, when the school bell goes, you know, they pack on up anyway. And, you know, they've filled out the self-reflection form. You've completed your own self-reflection on your lesson plan. So while they're doing that, you're either walking around assisting them or just giving them a bit of positive feedback or just quietly observing them do that, or you can take a minute to fill out your self-reflection on your own lesson plan, which we discussed, you know, the strengths, what you do differently next time. And filled out any recommendations that would be then to your principal, Richard Barry. In a vet sector, you would give that information to your registered training organisation, your RTO. So finally, if they've all been able to agree that those ticks stay where they are, they'll be able to tick you satisfactory, and they'll either tick that your training, design and delivery is satisfactory, or they'll tick that it's not yet, and they'll talk specifically about the categories that weren't and any advice they can give you for next time. So you get to sign that once they've printed that one out for you, and obviously there'd be a verbal discussion as well as that written feedback. You only sign that if there's any areas that weren't yet satisfactory, and then they sign it as well. So I hope, I know it's very long-winded, but I hope that makes sense there. At that point, I will also play it and double-check as the supervising assessor, and then I can mark it either competent or, you know, if we need to just film another quick 5 minutes. I'm sure it'll be fine though, Adam. Then, you know, there might be a second resubmission. It wouldn't be a whole 40 minutes. It would be maybe then some questions rather than filming again. You know, so if you had this situation again, what would you do differently? That style of resubmission. And yeah, then I'd just sign that off for you. So that would be an assessment record, not just of the one unit, but I can then use this observation checklist to cover all 4 units there. Okay, so good luck with that, and hopefully that's given you a little bit of a heads up as you're planning your presentations.